All right. So a friend of mine, Tommy, has been working as a baker for quite a while. And the situation is such that it was a good job for the situation that he was in when he got it because he didn't have a car, he didn't have a driver's license, and the job was within walking distance, right? He was a baker. Now, this means early hours, weird days. Tommy is not in sync with the rest of society working this job. Okay, that is the first and probably, I think, the biggest cost of working a job like that is that you don't get to see your friends. He's struggling even to make Wednesday night, meetup groups because he has to get up so early that running to 9 or 10 o'clock is too much. So it's a lot of sacrifice that he's been putting in for this job. But since then, he's gotten a driver's license and is not necessarily bound to this job in the same way that he was before. Okay. Now, of course, he's considerably younger than me and has still not been singed by the work world nearly as much as I have. And he cares. He cares about the environment. He cares about his coworkers and all this other stuff. And they asked a lot of him over the past, say, 6 months or so, because one of the workers there needed an extended FMLA for personal reasons and all that other stuff. And Tommy stepped up and helped pick up the slack. They hired this new person, though, who Tommy was supposed to be the manager over, but that person is absolutely insubordinate and belligerent to Tommy and just will not follow instructions. And in fact, is trying to deliver instructions to Tommy herself. So Tommy is struggling with this person for months and continued to ask for my advice and other people's advice about it. And it's, at the end of the day, I told him, if you've got somebody who's being unsubordinate and is not manageable, you cannot be a manager, and you need to let them know that that's not going to happen. If they're not respecting your authority and you don't have the ability to fire this person, they can't be your subordinate. It's that simple, And so that did eventually happen. But the FMLA stuff is over, and this other person is able to lay down demands. Like, she was able to get full weekends and everything else, and Tommy had to move his schedule back so that he loses his weekends and stuff, right? And the dynamic there is basically that Tommy is accommodating and trying to be a good sport and a good worker, and they're just running roughshod over him. And none of the changes that he's been expecting, particularly with the performance of this other person who's been there for a while now, it's not improved. All he does is complain, and it goes into the air, and nothing changes. So finally, he'd had enough and put in his 2 weeks, and I'm very proud of him for doing so because I know it's a big deal, and especially in this economy and all that other stuff. But of course, the last time he was talking to me about it, I finally told him, look, okay, first of all, let's talk about, the importance of this job in relation to your life and other jobs, other opportunities that may actually be out there, okay? Because, not to put too fine a point on it, but there are many baking positions available in the city of Charlotte. I'm sure that he can find a job somewhere that does something similar and maybe be respected a little more, maybe get a better schedule or something, right? It's not a unique position. And then the other point I wanted to make to him was that they kept messing with his money, right? So they switched him to salary when he moved to being a manager over this person. And then they started complaining about the hours he was putting in. Now the work was getting done, and he's a kick-ass worker, and he's on the text all the time, and he's advising this person on his days off and coming in on his days off and all this other stuff. Unpaid meeting time. They make them clock out for the mandatory meetings. I don't think that's legal. And they kept threatening to putting him back to hourly if he didn't put in more hours, right? Well, he finally put in his notice, and they sent in writing, we're putting you back to salary for the rest, or hourly for the rest of your tenure here, which is one of the few things that's actually illegal in North Carolina, surprisingly so. You have to give at least a full pay period before you adjust somebody's pay schedule like that. So at my advice, I told Tommy to reply to them like, okay, sure, I just hope this complies with North Carolina labor law. Here's a link. Woo. They responded, okay, we recognize that, you're fired, right? Classy. I don't know, that's retaliation very clearly. But, if you have already put in your notice, I don't know if there's really much recourse you can have. But it really showed their true colors about how much they appreciate his efforts during his time there. But one of the things that Tommy talked to me about was that he was afraid of losing his strength after leaving this job. Okay, now Tommy's a pretty wiry dude, he's shorter and much skinnier than me, but he's really strong for his build because he's lifting 40, 50-pound bags of flour and, hauling and mixing dough and lifting heavy stuff into and out of ovens and cleaning these ovens and all this brutal labor, I'm sure, right? And it's true. If you are doing something like that on the regular and you stop doing it, then you're going to atrophy, right? And he knows that I have a background, particularly in weightlifting, in powerlifting particularly, and so I was asking my advice about it, right? And I said, "Oh, okay, that's great. I'm glad to hear it." And everybody's got their opinion on how to work out and all that other stuff, but here's what I would advise is first of all, what's your workout space look like? He's like, "Well, it's my apartment above my grandpa, right? He has an apartment above his grandpa's place." I'm like, "Okay, well, you can't put heavy stuff up there. You're not going to put power rack and all that other stuff up there. But for your size and weight class, 50 or 70-pound dumbbells is probably the most you need. And you probably should get some adjustable weights just to consider the space, right?" Now, of course, I have some adjustable weights I'm trying to get rid of, but they're not professional, but they're pretty higher end. And I showed them to him, of course, and it's out of his range, and that's fine. It's totally fine. But he did find a pair of the kind that have they're the dumbbells with the sand in, the plastic with the sand in, and they're weights that you put onto these dumbbells with wing nuts attached. It's perfect, $40. That's plenty, because you can lift weights with bricks and, buckets of water and all that other stuff. People can do this stuff on the cheap. They do all the time. You don't have to spend a mint to lift weights. And you don't need to join a gym either. You can do plenty of things around the home, right? But in any case, he was asking me, well, I don't really even know where to begin. And I remember being in that position, okay? So I wanted to talk a bit about my exercise journey throughout my life and how I ended up getting to where I am. Now, I have not been to the gym in a considerable amount of time, and I haven't been, doing martial arts or anything like that since I moved out here. Last time I was in the gym was months ago, and I got to pay attention. That's something that this kind of rattled my cage on too. Is use it or lose it is basically how it works. And I was worried when I was moving here in the past couple of weeks. I was lifting a lot, and I was worried about what my recovery would be like, in particular, because when you haven't worked out for a while, the soreness does set in. And I did experience some, but I was actually pretty proud of how well I managed to get through that without too much pain and suffering. Especially considering my age. I'm getting a little long in the tooth, and I doubt I'll ever be able to lift the amount of weight that I managed to peak at. But that said, I'm still doing pretty good, I think, all things considered. I still have my biceps, and not that I'm very well defined, but I do have strength to move things and get up. And I've been on a keto diet for the past couple of months. I hit 250 pounds. And my body in homeostasis wants to stay around 240. That's where it wants to be lazy. But I can put on more, which I did during the holidays. And I get to a point, especially right around 260. If I get up to 260, I'm like, this cannot stand, right? So I've been on a keto diet for a couple of months, and I'm down to 228 as of today. And I noticed right away that as soon as I lose that 10, 15 pounds, I start moving like I used to. I don't bend down to pick things up. I cantilever my leg out and bend over at the hip to pick things up. When I get myself out of the car, I'm using my legs to pivot myself out instead of my arms. Things like that you don't really realize that you do when you weigh less, but because it becomes easier, because you become stronger for the amount of weight you're moving around of your own body, you start to rely on different movements that are more ergonomical and more efficient. This is how it works. And I've already started doing that and noticing, like, okay, yeah, I like being here better than there, right? It's just tougher for me to maintain. And I did offer him, I have a workout place in this facility that I offered, like, hey, if you want to ever come work out with me, I need to get in there too. Maybe this will be a good kick in my ass to get into the gym as well and start getting back to it. It is helping you learn how to do this stuff, because it's not hard. It's repetitive, It's boring as hell, especially when you get to higher weights and it takes longer and you have recovery times and all that other stuff. It's not a lot of fun lifting weights, I'm going to put it that way, but it is satisfying, right? Because you see changes, your body moves better and all those other things. But anyway, I want to talk a bit about the whole thing of my experience, because Tommy basically explained something that is very common. Is I don't even know where to begin. And if you get online, you're going to get 1,000 different answers. Everybody's got a different answer to working out, right? So for starters, the biggest thing is 30 minutes of exercise a day, just walking. That alone, that one thing alone, if you walk 30 minutes a day, your risk for heart disease drops considerably compared to people who don't. Everything else is diminishing returns, right? Yes, if you work out 4 hours a day and become an American Ninja Warrior or whatever, your risk for heart disease goes considerably lower. But the big difference really is, do you move your body or not? And my philosophy really is whatever gets you off the couch, right? Whatever it is. You play squash or tennis or volleyball, or you like to run. I hate running, or you want to lift weights or whatever. As long as you're moving your body, that's the big difference. So I think, first of all, to anyone who's ever looking at this down and saying, where do I begin? That's it. And just explore and find something that you're going to find a routine for. That's been my issue with lifting in general with the place that I was at. Is the closest decent gym was about 15 minutes away. It was a Gold's Gym. And I've been at Gold's Gym before, and they're pretty good facility. This one's they've got good equipment. They've cheaped out on other parts, but that's okay. I just need to get in there and lift weights. But I just never found a routine of getting in there. It's not that I've never had a gym that's 15 minutes away, but with my current work schedule, blah, blah, blah. And there's no excuse but myself. I had 24 access. I could go there anytime I wanted to, but I just never found a bit rhythm to it. Now I'm here. So I'm thinking about trying to find another rhythm. And I feel like this might actually be a good opportunity for me to actually have a reason to get started, and then hopefully break off the rust and get back to it. But when I think about my physical fitness journey throughout my life, okay, you start at the beginning. Okay, in elementary school, we had recess for an hour every day. They had us, it was rained a lot, of course, it was Seattle, so we had to be under the blacktop a lot or in the gym. But we ran and jumped and played football and tag and climbed around on the monkey bars and all that other stuff that you do right up into the 6th grade. You're a very physical creature. And while I was never in, grand shape, I was no Olympic champion as a kid, I could keep up and was, decent at catching the football and could throw it pretty far and wasn't always last pick to kick ball and all those other things. I was not the first, but I held a respectable mediocrity during elementary school. Now in junior high, you only have a gym class, but that gym class did have us exercising. And of course, this was before the days of smartphones and too much unending entertainment where nowadays you can try, good luck to you, trying to watch all the stuff available to your streaming service. You'll never catch up to it. But when I was younger, there was only so much. Video games were good. They were getting better, but they would run out of their entertainment value, and you could only watch the same movie on VHS so many times before that got old. And so we did spend a lot of times running around and clambering around and exploring the green belts and the parks and all those other things. That still gave us a lot of body movement in middle school and even high school. High school is much more regimented. You're sitting behind a desk. They're training you for the work world. But even though my physical activity was reduced in high school, I still ended up moving my body considerably, even though I wasn't actually focusing on any particular physical fitness. Now, after I left high school, I worked at a diner, and I did every single job there. I did bus tables, waited tables, dishwasher, and cook for a little while. I did not like cooking, and cooking is a very stationary job. I mean, you lift some stuff out of the freezer or whatever, but you're standing in front of a line the whole time. But dishwasher, busboy, and waiting tables is a full contact sport. Never let anyone tell you either that waiting tables is an unskilled job. You have to be mentally on it. You have to be thinking about all the various tables that you're dealing with, making sure everybody's satisfied and all that stuff, because you live on tips and they pay attention to how well you're serving them, you know. And one of the things I remember being a teenager working at that restaurant was how many pills the older women, the waitresses that worked there would be popping. They were trading giant horse pills of Advil, and I was nothing illegal, of course, as far as I know, anyway. But they would gather together, you know, and horse trade the various painkillers that they had, because how brutal this job is on your body. You know, you get 50, 60 years old trying to wait tables. Oh my God, you know, the money is good to begin with when you're a teenager, but it doesn't change when you're 60 years old. And, you know, it takes a toll on the body. And that's something I remembered. But again, lots of physical activity kept me in okay shape. After that, the restaurant closed down due to health code reasons. It was a pretty gross place. I was unemployed for a few months, but then I found a job at an AV studio. Now, we'll call it a studio. They would rent out audiovisual equipment for conventions and trade shows and all these other things, projectors and flip charts and whatever. Lots of deliveries, lots of heavy stuff. They did not have LCD monitors back then. They were a 35-inch monitor was a huge heavy beast, and then there came into it in a big plastic travel case, or it's not plastic, but whatever that stuff is. The big heavy travel cases with the metal brackets on the corners and such. Lifting these things into a van by myself, 19, skinny kid too. Not good for me, and I was sore all the time working that job. And they also had me doing inventory in their warehouse, where I was clambering up almost 3 stories up on these giant shelves, rummaging through their stuff and labeling things and putting their inventory together, because they didn't even know what they had. I could have fallen from those things. That's whatever. It was so dangerous. But I worked that job for a while. Okay, so here's one for you guys. I did, in fact, during my unemployment phase, cut my hair, dress real nice, and wander down to the business park down in the valley, and then hit up every single business looking to apply for a job. Whereupon I encountered John Fitzgerald, who ran this AV studio, who happened to be the owner and happened to be at the shop that day, and liked my pluck when I came in and hired me right on the spot. That did, in fact, happen to me. That mythological, walk in the door, shake hands, and smile at the people and get a job thing actually did happen for me. And it was, in retrospect, a good thing. But man, that guy was a jerk. I will never forget how awful that human being was. Worst boss I've ever had, hands down. Yelling at people. This big, tall, lanky guy who was just intimidating. Electric teeth, too. He had this crazy blue, overdone, redone teeth. And he just ripped into everyone, and everybody just took it because he was the man in charge. He was the guy with the pay, And I was young. I thought, this is what the work world is like. This angry dad guy that would just yell at people, But I finally had enough of that job because I was getting brutalized physically. And a friend of mine got a job answering phones, doing technical support. Once again, this was the 90s. So they were just hiring bodies off the ground to fill these phones because they knew problems were coming with the new release of Internet Explorer and stuff. And so using that contact, I got a job doing the same thing. Now I was sitting behind a desk and I started to feel not so great. Nevertheless, I still had to use public transportation. So it meant a lot of walking, a lot of standing, a lot of moving about that I still got some physical exertion, even though my occupation had me sitting behind a desk for 10 hours a day. Quite literally, it was 4-10 shifts. And then I got another job doing, again, tech support for a game company called Sierra Online, which also had me sit behind a desk. And I started to have some problems, a little bit. And then from there, I got a job doing tech support at another game studio called Humongous Entertainment, where I was sitting behind a desk. And then I was really starting to feel health issues. I hurt my ankle, kept running down a set of stairs, and just not, my body was not able to keep up with what I thought it could do anymore. But I was promoted at that job back when these things happened as well, from a help desk tech from a phone tech to a help desk tech, which meant I was hauling and lifting and moving computers from under people's desks all day long. This was in the days before remote support, first of all. And a lot of this stuff had to do with hardware because we were dealing with artists and sound engineers and all these other things. We had all sorts of different hardware in this environment. And it involved grabbing these machines from under people's desks, bringing them back to my own office. I shared an office with another guy, and we had racks of stuff that we would work on all day long, in addition to playing video games. So while there was some sitting, there was still a lot of lifting and moving around, and I started to feel a bit better. And then I got another help desk job at Sound Transit, which was even more physical because it involved the same stuff. But the elevator there was like run by a small hamster in a wheel, and it took forever. And so I would actually carry this stuff up and down the stairs of this building to deliver, because it was just easier and faster to do that. Lots of equipment moving around, all that other stuff. Then I got a job at Microsoft at Xbox Live, which was a very technical job, and it involved sitting behind the desk. And of course, I had a new child on the way. So there was a lot of stagnation at home, not a lot of moving around at home. When you have a young baby, it's difficult to pack them up and move to go even to the grocery store. It's an ordeal. So while there's some lifting going on with the child, and that definitely was a factor, I was spending a lot of time sitting behind a desk. And that was the first time I ever had my back give out on me. Walking along to the cafeteria with a couple coworkers, and my back just seized up, and I had to sit down right there and barely limped my way back to the office a few minutes later and endured that. And that was a recurring issue because I was in development and production support, all desk jobs, for a number of years. And my back was always giving me a hard time. And I would go visit chiropractors, and chiropractors, some of them are good, okay? And I think that there's some merit to being adjusted and all that other stuff. But a lot of times you end up dealing with guys that are, trying to give you crystal magic, or, they're always trying to sell something on the side, or there's some spiritual aspect or whatever. There's always some element to the chiropractic, rather than just, I'm a doctor here to help you fix your back, And so it's always a big turnoff. But the thing is, it wasn't working. It would give me a temporary sense of relief because my body would be forced back into its alignment, but things were out of whack, and I would just fall right out of whack. Okay. I was working uptown, and my back was just killing me all the time. And so finally I went to talk to, I think, an orthopedist, whatever it is, the person talking about physical structure and health and backs and stuff. And I went and talked to a specialist, and I told him my back is hurting me all the time. And he immediately thought that I was trying to get drugs out of him. He's like, I'm not going to just prescribe. And I'm like, I'm serious, man. I'm not talking about what drugs you can provide. I want to know what's wrong with my back. I am too young to be feeling this way. I was 27 or so, 26, 20, something like that, mid to late 20s. I'm way too young to be having these kinds of back pain. I want to know what's wrong with me and what I can do about it, because it's making me miserable. I can't sleep, all this other stuff. So finally, he actually takes me seriously, and they did do a scan on my back, and he's like, look, I can't find anything physically wrong with you. You got pain. And so this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to prescribe you these horse pills of ibuprofen. And ibuprofen is not great for your liver, I think. One of the liver or the kidneys, I can't remember which one. These giant pills of ibuprofen for you to take. And if those don't work, then come back and we'll talk about a pain management regimen. And those words rattled around in my head as I walked back to work from First Hill, walking down that hill, because I knew what it meant, okay? It meant opioids. And people who get on that stuff don't tend to get off it. And they often end up having problems because they become addicted and want stronger stuff because they become tolerant to those drugs. And the pain, of course, doesn't go away because you're not actually fixing the problem, you're just masking it, right? And I was wandering down, I'm like, this is not right. Something is not right here. And about a year, maybe 2 years before, my brother-in-law, who was a big workout freak, he gave me this book called Starting Strength. It was written by a guy named Mark Ripto. And it's very technical. You open this thing and it's just all these various pictures of how to stand and posture yourself for these core workout exercises. And he swore by it. But I remembered a phrase in the foreword. I'd only read a little bit of this book. I remember a phrase in the foreword where he said, you cannot abandon 100,000 years of evolution just because the desk was invented. You have to continue moving in a way that our ancestors did in order to keep your body in peak physical order. And if you don't do the things that they needed to do to stay in that shape, you need to replicate that activity efficiently in order to maintain health. Otherwise, you're going to atrophy and problems are going to occur. And I went back home and I read that book. The first thing that he says in that book is physical strength is the most important thing in life, which is a very controversial statement. And he acknowledges this in the next sentence. He says, many people will object to this very vehemently because they're going to argue something spiritual or something intellectual or whatever, because they take issue with that statement. And he says two things. One, you're not going to be doing much spiritually or intellectually if you can't move your body. If you are an invalid and bedridden, your physical strength now is incredibly important to you, and you can't participate in a lot of those things that you would like to do. Now, obviously, you can be Stephen Hawking and still be productive and all that other stuff. It's not to say that the handicapped are not productive. But if you have an option, physical being strong is better than not being strong, right? And then the other thing he says is, you take one of those people that tell you that, you go and make them strong because they're probably weak. You make them strong and see how their attitude changes about it, right? If I can get you under the bar, I will change your life. It's not a phrase from Ripto. I've heard that from someone else, but it was a powerful statement too, because it's true. I took that information, that idea to heart, and thought to myself, it's probably because I'm not actually moving my body, and I should do that. Unfortunately, there was at the time, I believe it was, I think I was working at Disney, and there was a YMCA next door, so I could go up to the YMCA next door, and I printed out, because this was actually more efficient, printed out a workout plan from Men's Health. And it was the recuperating from injury workout plan. And while I wasn't injured, I sure felt like I was in that state. And so I followed that program, and it was a 3-month program of, ABA exercise routines, single leg deadlifts and, push-ups and all these other things, just basic, very basic exercises. And it was very, very hard for me. But I saw progress pretty quickly. And so from there, I printed out and started to follow a year-long workout program. I wonder if I was the only person to ever actually follow that thing from beginning to end, as instructed. But I did. I've spent a whole year following this Men's Health workout program, and I was in a lot better shape. But one of the frustrations that I had was that you would go in and use a bunch of these machines in the gym, and you just didn't see much progress. My body felt better, but I didn't look any different really, and I was skinny and kind of misshapen, it felt like to me. And I went back to Starting Strength. And one of the things he says is, Smith machines suck. And the reason is very simple, is that you're isolating a particular muscle in the machine, racking your arm in here and only moving it at a particular range, targeting one specific muscle. It's not how the body works in real life. You pick up a weight and move it around. There's all sorts of strange muscles firing all over the place in your body to maintain your balance. And, getting down on the ground and standing up exercises a whole variety of different muscles that aren't being used in Smith machines. He says, if I've seen plenty of people who work out for years on Smith machines, and they deride the lack of progress they get, and then the minute they move to the barbell, in 2 weeks they see a difference. And so I read that, and I'm like, I'm going to give this program a try. It's hard because you have to stretch. To do proper squats, a lot of us have calves that are not long enough to actually move the full range of motion. Now, are there things you can do to mitigate that? It doesn't mean you should not squat until you can stretch that far, but you have to put blocks under your heels and stuff like that in order to do the movement properly, and it's uncomfortable. So it behooves you to continue to stretch. And I started to stretch and stretch and stretch, and slowly, ever so slowly, I started to achieve a range of movement that I could do the exercises properly without any kind of assistance, and was starting to see remarkable progress, incredible progress. I went from not being able to bench press 70 pounds, which is, in the grand scheme of things, not very much. I mean, I could, but it was very hard. Starting at 70 pounds and moving all the way up to 275 at my peak. And as I started to get bigger and started to get stronger, I started to become more, encouraged by what was happening to me. And I started to eat better, and I started to focus on my health a bit more, and make sure that I had the right vitamins and all that other stuff. And I also joined karate. Now, karate does not lend itself well to a man who is 6'1" and over 200 pounds. If you know anything about the history of karate, karate was developed by a diminutive island people in the southern territories of Japan, in an area that happens to be right in the middle between Shikoku and mainland China and Formosa, the island of Taiwan. So it was a very important trade route. And they would repeatedly be conquered by people who were bigger, better armed, and stronger than them. And they would take away their weapons and such. So the Okinawans developed a style of self-defense against people who would just come and take stuff from them on a regular basis when they were being outnumbered, and using implements that could be found around the farm. The sai, the exotic weapon that Raphael, the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle, uses, that's a pitchfork for grabbing bales of rice. The nunchuck is for threshing rice. The bow staff is just for carrying water. These are things that you would find around the house in medieval Okinawa, or late Middle Ages, Renaissance, whatever, however you want to put it. They're exotic weapons to us, but they were just farm tools, is what the style learns. But with a lot of the jumps and kicks and techniques for dealing with people that are stronger and outnumbering you, it's tough when you're big. It's tough to practice this style, but you get very capable, I find, if you're doing the real stuff and you actually try to practice these techniques, kicking over your head and doing spins and rolls and all that other stuff. So as I progressed in my karate career, I continued to lift periodically until I finally started to approach black belt. Now, to achieve black belt in my particular style, it took me 7 years to get there. And when you hit red belt, you have to first of all qualify for what they call black belt class, which is a special Saturday training class that teaches you the actual material for the test, so that you can go through and practice the test. And if you don't qualify, what they're saying is you need another semester of training to be ready for the level of quality that we're expecting to have you pass this test, right? So I was going to the studio 4 or 5 days a week when I was training, and staying late sometimes to train with my partner. I was also assisting and helping kids, which was super fun. I really enjoyed that. And I was working out, I was lifting, and I was also using the bag to practice my bunkai, practice my partner work at force. And which was really fun because people would be like, what are you doing? Because I'd be coming in with these strikes to the bag that are meant to be temple strikes or whatever. I started to see my six pack. I was at 218, and I was a good 218. I was just in such good shape heading into my black belt. And I'd never been in such good shape, of course, because after I got my black belt, I promptly went on a cruise and ate to my heart's content and never quite got back to there. But I did practice karate for a number of years afterwards and still continued to lift afterwards. You have to spend a year in probation with your black belt before they give you the actual full black belt. It's not nearly as hard to pass that test. And really, it's more about for the kids to make sure that they're not getting too full of themselves for having that rank. But once you finally do it, the restrictions come off, and that's when they give you the certificate. And then I started to train towards my second degree. But I never got that far. That's because I moved out here. But during that time, I was still lifting. And one of my goals was to max out the Olympic bar. The Olympic bar, a standard Olympic bar, is rated to have up to 500 pounds on it. And I wanted to reach to a point where I could deadlift 500 pounds, and I did it. At my peak, I was squatting 5x5, 365, 370 pounds, something like that, which is a lot. That's really hard, and I would fail it. And using the belt and all that stuff, it is very difficult to move that level of weight for me. And I managed to get 500 pounds off of the ground twice in the same session. And I never reached it again. But I managed to do it, and I was in excellent shape. So I learned a lot. It took me years, both to get my black belt and to get to a point where my body was capable of lifting that kind of weight. And Arnold Schwarzenegger, and I'm going to paraphrase because I don't remember exactly how he put it, but he put it perfectly. He said, you cannot buy it, you cannot steal it, you cannot borrow it, you can't inherit it, you can only earn it. And there's something gratifying about it. And there's no feeling in the world like looking at that amount of weight and saying, I'm going to exert my will on the universe right now and move this and do it, boy. Oh, feeling it come off the ground was nothing like anything else. The sense of satisfaction of actually having accomplished that goal was incredible. But I will admit that since moving out here to North Carolina, I have not been diligent about my physical fitness at all. I did join the gym, the YMCA that was nearby, which was a nice one because it didn't have teenagers. If you've ever gone to the YMCA I've had great experiences with, except the only problem is that when it's next to a high school, the teenagers come out and man, they are dummies on the floor. Please boys, not 6 of you in a rack. Please use the safety catches so that your partner isn't on the ground with the barbell on them, stuff like that. But for the most part, I always had lots of positive experiences, with the one exception that the people running the place would get upset at me sometimes for the noise I was making doing deadlifts. And they're like, you're making too much noise over here because you're throwing the weights. And I'm like, no, I'm actually not throwing the weights, and I am controlling them as best as possible. This is an Olympic lift, and this is proper form. I recognize your concern about the noise. You don't have a platform here. I'll put pads down and try to reduce it. But this is the fact of it. When you're lifting 400 pounds off the ground, it makes some noise, I'm afraid. I've had to push back a couple of times and a couple of different administrators at the YMCA over that. But almost always they would have a discussion with somebody and they'd be like, no, yeah, he's right. He's doing it serious. He's not a teenager chucking those weights to be cool. He's doing it because it's you 400 pounds is more than he weighs, But anyway, I did join the gym nearby. COVID hit. I bought some equipment and a weight rack and stuff. Very expensive too at those times. Very hard to get free weights during those days. But I assembled a gym down in my basement and used it intermittently. It's been hit or miss. Workout classes in the morning sometimes or whatever, but never really found an excellent routine. But I have made some progress. I even tried to run a 10K or whatever it is. Is 10K? No, it was some amount. It was basically a running program to try to get you to consistently run. I hate running, boy. Nothing's better for you to get your cardiovascular system up and getting able to get your wind. That was what I was trying to do, is improve my wind. But man, I hate running so much. There's the constant pain. It sucks. But I have spent a considerable amount of my adult life working out, just not consistently. But the beauty of lifting in particular is that once you stretch the muscle belly, that's really the hard part. Is your muscles are not, they're formed at a certain size, and the human body only adapts to what you tell it to do. You can't look in the mirror and say, I want to look like Arnold Schwarzenegger body, and hey, why don't you lose that spare tire around the waist too? That would be great. Your body doesn't respond to that. You have to tell it. They call it strength programming, and that's exactly what it is. You grab a weight, you lift a bunch. Your body, what happens when you lift a weight that is beyond your normal capacity is you develop injury. You actually have what are called micro tears in your muscles, and you end up actually having micro fractures in your bones because of the strain that that weight has put on. Now, your body is smart. It sees this damage and it's like, oh, we are experiencing hardship that we have not been used to. So we need to do something about that. And it causes your body to release human growth hormone to repair the damage. So your body releases this human growth hormone, and it begins to repair the damaged muscle, and it begins to add calcium to your bones. It makes your bones thicker and stronger to lift weights. Because one of the main, I think, misconceptions that people have about the anatomy is that the skeleton is just a frame by which the muscles hang off of. And that's kind of true, I suppose. But it's all holistically interconnected. The bones are contained in these bags that are connected to ligaments and tendons that connect muscles that are also in their own belly that is made up of protein, and blood is flowing through all of it. It veins, all of this whole stuff, nerves, right? It's all interconnected. And it is all interconnected to the will. Your brain is the one that's firing all those electrons that are telling the rest of your body, grab this weight and pull it up off the ground, even though it's really hard. You have to actually physically engage your brain to tell it to fire so that your body responds, even though it's trying to, but you have to convince it through that flooding of your neurology of this instruction to your body to do this stuff. And you also build neural pathways as you do these repeated motions. And it's the same with karate, where as you have to do the same motion over and over, as the part of your body adapts, not only muscles and bone and tendons and stuff become stronger, but your neurology becomes stronger too, as those pathways become used repeatedly, and your body will rely on them. That's part of what we call muscle memory. You know, when somebody comes to attack me now, which, you know, that doesn't happen, and usually it's made in jest, I naturally block out of the way because I've seen that motion so damn many times. That's the first thing I'm trying to do is deflect it, right? That's because the muscle memory, that pathway, it's become instinctual because that's something I've done so much of, right? And the same thing happens with weightlifting. Your body becomes used to the motion, but you keep increasing the level of weight on the motion over and over. Your body repairs, you put more strain on it, your body repairs, you put more strain on it, you get bigger, your bones get stronger, your neurology becomes more resilient. And another thing that Mark Ripto says in Starting Strength, a strong man is harder to kill than a weak man. It's not to say you're going to survive getting hit by a car, but if you got a bunch of muscle and tough bones, you're going to probably come out of there better off than you would have if you didn't have all that stuff, right? And to my larger point, all that back pain that almost had me on an opiate regimen all went away. My choice in life is back pain or squats. I'm starting to have back pain again because I haven't been squatting. I know what I got to do, right? But when you're starting out on this stuff, you don't know where to begin, right? Yeah, I read this book, and this book had some great advice, but I didn't feel like lifting heavy weights was where I wanted to go. And in fact, I would say that during the 90s when I was growing up, there was a stigma against bodybuilders. There was a stigma about being a musclehead, and you wanted to look all slim and svelte like Antonio Banderas or something, right? I kind of prided myself on the fact that I was skinny and I was lithe and stuff. But that only carries you so far, first of all. And the reality is people like muscles. There's a going trope, and it's true, a meme that you see where it's where you expect that you're going to get looked at by a lot of girls, but you get looked at by guys way more frequently. People are, wow, you did a good job. That is true. That's absolutely true. I would get compliments all the time in the gym. I see you in here working out. You're doing great or whatever. You'd be doing the same thing. You go up to somebody and say, I see you're working out. Good job. Very rarely is a girl coming up and going, ooh, to your biceps. That does not happen, at least not to me, right? But the improvement that you see in yourself too is really fun. You start seeing definition. I do take a picture of my back and see muscle definition back there. This is really cool, and you do, again, start moving in ways that you didn't normally move because your body is capable of balancing. I pick things up. I get out of the car. I move around corners. I, grab and move things and people quite differently when I am in better shape than when I don't, because I have the leverage, because my muscles are stronger compared to the rest of my body, right? And ladies, I know you don't necessarily like the idea of lifting because you're afraid of becoming an Arnold Schwarzenegger yourself. You don't want to look like those giant chicks in the, Miss Universe contest or whatever. First of all, it's going to take you a long while. It's going to take you a lot of time and effort to look like that, okay? And probably some roids, okay? Women don't have nearly as much testosterone in their bodies. Their ability to grow their muscles biologically is much harder, okay? This is just a natural fact. This is not me being some sort of supremacist or whatever. It's just a fact that it's harder for you to lift those weights. But the human growth hormone response is the same. And the tears to your muscles and the tears to your bones is the same. And the reaction of your body going, oh crap, we're having to lift heavy stuff, heavier than we're normally used to. We need to repair this and prepare for more, delivers calcium into your bones. You want to put a stick in the eye of osteoporosis? Do some squats. Not joking. It helps immensely to tell your body to put calcium on. You can eat as many calcium pills as you like. If your body's not getting the instruction to deliver it to your bones, it's not going to do it. It's going to reside in your system and then eventually pass out. Okay, so put it to use. But that said, weightlifting is not for everybody, right? In fact, weightlifting is only for a handful of people. A lot of people look at it and I don't want to look like that. Okay, that's fair. And you know what? Higher reps, lower weights. That's really the answer to that. I prefer to get bigger. I prefer to look larger. I like to be strong. So yeah, I am a meathead in that regard. I am nowhere near the top of the meatheads though. And that is part of the intimidation factor. You come into a place like Gold's Gym, it's always frequented, Gold's in particular, because they have the larger free weights, is frequented by people who are larger, people who are in good shape, people who are working out every day for hours at a time and stuff. People who are, training for various sports competitions and whatnot, right? You come into a place like that and you're like, oh my God, I do not belong here. Happened to me a couple of times, particularly at Gold's. YMCA is a lot better because you see a lot more average everyday folks there, but still a lot of those folks are in really great shape and it can be intimidating, right? And you think, where do I begin? Well, I'll tell you the first thing is that if you go into a gym without a plan, that's a plan to fail. You need to know what you're going to do before you go into the gym. I see it all the time. People who are just starting in the gym, they come in, they're maybe even wearing their, dress shirt and dress shoes and stuff. I've seen that, where they just grab a machine and try this and grab another machine and try that, and then they leave because they don't really know what they're doing, right? You just don't want to do that. I mean, it's okay to explore a facility and see what they've got, but if you're going to do this, know what you're going to do before you go in to it. And that's true of any workout. If you're going to go play volleyball, okay, then you know you're going to play volleyball. But if you're going to go lift weights or do any kind of workout regimen, you should know what that plan is before you go do it so that you know what success looks like and keep track of your progress. How many of these did I do? Did I fail at any point? What do I do next time I come in here? Do I add some weights? Do I add some reps? Do I just try it again in a different way or whatever, right? Have a plan in how you're going to approach it and understand what you're trying to achieve, okay? But that said, don't let the analysis paralyze you, okay? Try different things and find something you like. I know, and I am no different. I do not like to exercise. As much as I have done so in the past, plenty of times I'd be looking at the clock in karate. Oh my God, how much more do we have to do? I'd be looking at the weights and going, I could just fudge this and just not do them, but these weights aren't going to lift themselves, I trick myself into going to the gym. I'm just going to go drive down the street. Hey, there's a gym. Let's go see what's going on in there, right? I do have to trick myself into doing it because I don't want to do it. It sucks. I don't think there are very many. There are some people that truly love this stuff. I've met them, and God bless them, man. I wish I felt that way. I wish I was like, oh, I can't wait to get up at 6 a.m. to go do my 3-mile run. Lady I met recently, she's like an amateur bicyclist who's in fantastic shape and doing these crazy runs and stuff like that. And she rides every day, like 20 miles. I'm like, not me, man. Never. I would never do that. But some people enjoy it that way. And you know what? It gets her off the couch and she looks great for it. And she's going to be in great health for it too. So, whatever your poison, if you love it, God, lean into it, man. As long as you don't think it'll injure you. Which we get into one other thing, injury. So weightlifting, strangely enough, especially powerlifting, is actually one of the safest forms of exercise you can do if you do it properly. It's important to follow form. Read that book. It's boring as hell. This is the position you want to be in. This is the way you lock your arms out. This is how you breathe. All that other stuff. It is meant to put you in a position to maximize your efficiency, first of all, and also not to hurt yourself. Don't be lazy and not use the catches, because the time you don't use the catches is when you're going to need them. The weight can slip out of your hands. You may not have the strength today, and suddenly you find yourself unable to get all the way up to the rack, and you have to fail. If those catches aren't there, you're in trouble, right? Unless you got a spotter, which spotters even, a lot of them don't know what they're doing, right? Trust but verify. And also, do it correctly. But as long as you do it correctly, the only way you can really get injured is if you don't listen to your body. And for me, my body gives me about 1 or 2 warnings. I start to feel a twinge. It starts to hurt. This is too much weight, man. And I can usually get the weight back on the rack at that point. But if I try to push it past that, I'm going to hurt myself and I'm going to be laid up for a week and not be able to work out. Okay. And of course, I have injured myself doing the bench press. I don't like the bench press. If I could get rid of one exercise, that would be it. Mark Ripto actually agrees with you on that, because being able to bail is very hard. You have to actually lower the weight down onto your hips to bail properly on bench press, unless you have catches somewhere near the extent of your arms. And you don't want the catches up too high because you're not doing the exercise properly if you don't go low enough, right? So you have to have that sweet spot between almost touching your chest and crushing your chest, right? A lot of racks don't have that, but you do what you can in order to prevent injury, because I have dropped 200 pounds on my chest before, and let me tell you, it took a while for those ribs to heal. Okay, so not to say you can't get injured, but it wouldn't have happened if I had used the catches, is the moral of that particular story. But repetitive use, delayed onset soreness and stuff like that will also make it so that you can't do as much as you feel like you could, and certainly not if you give yourself a week's worth of rest when you're continually training, and that's okay. It's just continually progress. Keep going in there and keep doing the thing. It's not fun. It's not entertaining. You got to tune yourself out, listen to music, watch the news on the TV or whatever it is that you do to distract yourself. But if you get through it on a regular basis, you see the results, and it happens fast. I have seen far more injuries from people who are playing squash in particular. They hurt their knees bad in squash because the floor is unforgiving. Tennis is another one. And the new happening sport now is pickleball, which is basically tennis, but I can actually hit the ball. But that's another one that's bad on your knees too. All the cutting and going back and forth. Karate's not great on your knees either, especially when you're doing a lot of turns and twists and such. You have to train your body a lot to become used to those techniques. And I've seen people break their own ankles trying to do stuff that they had not trained enough for and were not physically ready for. I've seen that happen because they did not respect the effort that is required to be able to do those movements properly and train up to that. So the two things are follow form. Form is the most important thing, not the weight. In fact, when I get back into it, I don't even use any weight whatsoever. I just use the barbell to remember the motions and go through that. And it's it's a bit of a workout. And only start adding weight when I feel comfortable with the fact that I'm back to where I need to be, stretched out and everything else. The good news is if you've done it before, it's much easier to climb back to where you were than it is to get there in the first place. That's another one. The progress is going to be slow to begin with. You're going to feel frustrated by it because you're not growing as fast as you'd like. But it does make a difference slowly but surely. It just takes time, and you have to be patient with your body. As you get older, I learned once about I hit maybe 42 or so, my delayed onset muscle soreness, my recovery day turned into 2 days. And I just couldn't avoid it. Now I was able to mitigate it a lot with BCAAs. BCAAs are amino acids. They are not harmful at all. They are found in red meat. I believe they're extracted with the stuff that you buy off of sunflowers, if I remember right. But it's just weird building blocks that you don't really get a lot of in your diet just in general. You get some of this stuff, it's like $20 for like a year's supply because it's just that you only need a little of it. Tastes like hell. And the only real way to deal with that when you're taking a supplement that tastes like hell is just put in a little water, stir it, just drink it. Don't try to mix it in with something and try to, this is not going to work. Just power through it. It's been my, I remember watching a video finally where a guy's like, this is how to drink creatine. Yeah. Creatine's another one that I'll take. That one has a little bit more dubious needs. It's something that people talk about as hurting your kidneys. That's not necessarily true. Creatine is something that's found in muscles, and it's if you overload on it, you can increase your capacity to lift, usually maybe by about 5 pounds, and makes your muscles a little bigger because it helps them retain water and stuff. You can do without creatine. I think it helps, but it's not important. But as far as recovery, BCAAs are great. Just try to avoid the stuff that puts like mahuang and other stimulants in there, because that's you find these workout energy drinks, and it's like, I would like my heart to not beat at 170 beats per minute, please. This is bad stuff. And then listen to your heart rate, of course. Heart rate's another one. Is lifting you don't think of as really being intensive, but it is HIIT training. High intensity workout training, and your heart rate shoots right up when you're lifting heavy weights because it has to deliver all that blood. And so if your heart rate is high and you start trying to do your next set, you'll run out of steam because your heart just keeps going faster. You just, I can't do this, right? So you have to take your time. But anyway, I am hoping that Tommy does take me up on my offer. They laid him off today in response to his answer that I don't think you should be changing my pay schedule during the pay period according to the law. So they just decided to cut him. Again, I don't think he has much recourse, but good riddance, man. For a couple $100 that they're trying to nickel and dime him out of by adjusting his pay schedule and some petty revenge for him turning in his 2 weeks notice, because now they have to figure out what to do because this guy has been just willing to do everything for them. Good, and if he's anxious to keep his physical form and takes me up on that, I would help him, and that would encourage me to get back to it too. I have no excuse. It's down the hall, down an elevator. It takes me less than 5 minutes to get there. If I can't do that, but it is intimidating. That's the thing. And Tommy, for his goals, is lucky to have someone like me that can be like, okay, here, I'm not going to tell you exactly what to do. Here's what works for me. These are things that I know, but your goals are your own, and I don't want to tell you how to go about it. But this is the Bible that I read for working out starting strength. If you ever have a chance to read about this stuff, if you're ever thinking about it, I don't generally plug things. I'm not making any money on it. You can find the book for free in PDF. I don't think Mark Crypto even minds, because his attitude really is, he runs a gym and all this stuff. His attitude is just, you got to fight the ravages of time by working out. That's all there is to it. And whatever your poison, and his particular poison is lifting weights and teaching others to lift weights. And he's got some strong people in his gym. It's remarkable some of the weight that they can lift. there are some like me that just aren't capable, whatever reason. And I've seen this in the gym. The gym that I went to in Ballantyne, there are a couple of Carolina Panthers that live in the country club there. And I would see a couple of them at the gym from time to time. And they're very easily identifiable because they're huge animals. They're barely even human. And 225 is work for me to put on the bench. 225 is where they begin in the NFL. They say, how many times can you lift this off your chest? And those guys do it 20, 30 times or whatever. 5 times is my target when I lift 225, 5 times 5. But I'd see one of these guys over there benching, and I get into my position, I get on my bench, I've got my catches, I get my shoulders locked out properly and get ready behind the weight and work to get that weight up off the rack. And then I turn and look at this guy, and he's just like over there on his phone. He just sits down and then puts it back and gets up and starts looking at his phone, and not even out of breath, barely even breathing harder than he was. No sweat, just wearing his cap backwards. I hate that. But it is what it is. We all have our genetic propensities. Tommy, unlikely, will probably never lift 500 pounds. But that doesn't mean he can't achieve the best version of himself by stretching toward a reasonable but far goal in terms of a weightlifting career. Or, find something else that he enjoys, bicycling or hiking or whatever. As long as he's moving and keeping his body going, I think that's a good idea. Because the trick is, we can't ignore 100,000 years of evolution just because a desk was invented. We do so at our peril. And as I get older, I become more and more aware of the fact that time continues to move on and my body gets a little harder to move every year and a little older, a little grayer and everything else. And the only way to really fight back against it is to tell your body to do something that it doesn't normally do. The more you do that, the healthier you're going to be. I find that if I've fallen into a workout routine and I'm starting to see progress, and I want to see that progress, I don't want to do things like drink alcohol and eat bad food and carbs and lays around and stuff. I start wanting to go. I start wanting to see that progress, and I start to live a healthier lifestyle as a result of that. And I'll tell you, man, nothing kills your workout routine more than a glass of wine the night before. It doesn't have to be much. I'll tell you, you drink a glass of wine, you get back into the gym the next day, you're like, this sucks. It sucks. So you find you don't drink it because you're like, I got to work out in the morning. I don't want to do that. I don't want to suffer. I want to hit my new 5-rep max or whatever your goal is, right? You have a goal, you have a plan, you know what you're doing. But if you ever are mystified by this stuff, or you feel intimidated or whatever, and you're listening to this and you know me, just reach out. I'm happy to come along with you, teach you what I know, and just remember, I'm just one guy. There are many, many experts, people who know way more than I do about this. But what I can say is I don't do things like do steroids. Now I do take testosterone as a replacement because my body's not creating as much testosterone as it should, and it's leaving me on unhealthy levels. So I do take testosterone as a supplement, and testosterone is a steroid. So it gives me much better results in the gym when I'm on testosterone, that's for sure. But I've never taken any of the stuff that weightlifters take. I have only ever taken supplements that are reasonable and natural and have no known adverse side effects. I'm not going into the GNC and taking weird stuff that not FDA approved, stay away from that stuff. I've taken some of that stuff in my young life and in my rage broke my own hand against the wall over some, I don't even remember why I was so mad at my friend, but I was like, because I was taking these crazy ass supplements from GNC that was probably jacking my already too high testosterone levels back then up to beyond normal. But be wary, pay attention to your body, get your hormones checked, talk to your sports doctor, all that other good stuff, so that you tell them what you're doing and what your plan is and stuff, and try to stick to it. But there's no replacement for repetition and practicing and just doing it and getting in there. And The frustration that people feel that lead them to things like steroids and stuff like that is when they start hitting their limits. Respect your limits. You can overcome your limits with drugs, and all sorts of different drugs, but drugs all have a cost. And if your body actually isn't physically ready to be able to do the things you're trying to do, and you're taking drugs to make it do them, you're going to lead to injury. And that's what you're trying to avoid. Injury works against you significantly. Being sore, that's part of the process. Actually being injured, you don't want it, right? But in any case, if you ever want a little advice, maybe you can work out with me and Tommy at my new facility here in this cool apartment that I'm living in. I hope if you're ever feeling intimidated by the idea of where to begin, remember, this is another thing that is very true that I've found. With rare exceptions, there are jerks. There always are jerks. But with rare exception, if you go into a gym and these people are in great shape and they're working hard and they look amazing and they know what they're doing and stuff like that, and they see you, the newbie, come in and you're trying, you are starting with low weights, you're kind of confused about it, you're watching the YouTube video trying to figure it out or whatever, maybe talking to somebody that's trying to help you out. They love it. I love it. You know, you see someone in there that's trying to turn it around, especially if you feel like I've got so far to go. You know, this is going to take me forever. Yeah, it is. But I'm glad you're here. I'm going to encourage you every step of the way. And I personally have never encountered anyone who hasn't, if they pay attention to you at all, they are encouraging. They want to help you. And if you ask questions, they'll give you advice. A lot of people love to give advice on working out. But the judgment that you fear when you come into a place like that, when you're dealing with people who work out, it doesn't exist. I promise you, it doesn't exist like you think it does. In karate, when you join a white belt class, they give you a light gi, which is basically pajamas. This is what it looks like. You know, this very light piece of cloth. You have to be barefoot in these white pants and this little blouse that ties off across the chest and the waist. You feel ridiculous. You do. Standing in this room with a bunch of people wearing the same thing. We've all been there. And it's the first thing we say, yeah, I know how it feels. Okay, it'll go away soon enough when you realize that nobody cares. In fact, that's part of the uniform here. We're all doing the same thing. We've all felt the same thing. There's a reason we wear this uniform. A, to identify to everyone that this is a class, that we are training about something. We're not actually hurting each other. This is a training environment. And also it provides the ability to move. You know, even the heavy gi is better than your clothing because it allows you to kick high and stuff like that. So the inertia of breaking past your own self-doubts and you're worried about being judged by others, if you can get through it and you can get over the hump of saying, man, I've got so far to go if I set this particular goal, it does. But you will see progress. You know, if you say to yourself, I just want to lose 100 pounds, you know, that's a lot. And if you make that happen, amazing. That is incredible. I have nothing but respect for someone who loses 100 pounds. Yeah, you got there. You got to a point where you had 100 pounds. Forget it. This is where you are now. You know, okay, accept it, own it. All right, I don't want to be like this anymore. Good. Take some action. Okay, they take some action. I don't know what to do. Help me out. Sure, I'll help you out. Absolutely. This is where you start. It's going to take a while. It's going to suck. But I'm glad you're here. I'm going to encourage you every step of the way. I can't do it for you. You can't earn it. You can't buy it. You can't borrow it or steal it. I can help you earn it, though. And that gives me a sense of satisfaction. And I think that most people who engage in physical exercise like this feel the same way. They're either tuned out in their own world or they are watching people and going, yeah, it's doing a good job. Or sometimes you're looking at the kids and you're like, oh my God, I can't believe they're doing that with the barbell here. Let me come stop you from hurting yourself. That is the judgment that I do pass on the kids. Stop being a dummy. You know you're being a dummy too. I know you are. I know you do. But don't be intimidated. The meatheads all started out skinny too. And there are plenty of people who were in there that you'll see that look like they're in fantastic shape and they got their act together that were not so when they first started. We all got to start somewhere. And we got respect for people who actually do it. Now, all I have to do is not be a hypocrite and do it myself. Anyway, that's me.